When your cat eats wet food every day, do you actually know what that means? Yes, it looks like you're just giving them a tasty meal, maybe even spoiling them a little. But behind that simple action, there's something deeper that most people miss. It's one of the most emotionally loaded things you do for your cat. And if you misunderstand it, which most owners do, you might be affecting their health, their behavior, and even how they see you. Let's start with what feeding wet food every day really means. Have you ever noticed how your cat reacts the moment you open a can of wet food? Most people think it's just excitement over taste. Here's what's actually happening. Your cat isn't just responding to flavor. They're responding to a biological signal. In the wild, cats are hunters. Their primary source of hydration comes from their prey. Fresh meat contains a high percentage of water, and their bodies evolved around that. Dry food doesn't replicate that experience, but wet food does. So when you feed your cat wet food, you're not just giving them something they like. You're triggering an instinct that tells them this is real food, this is survival. And emotionally, that matters more than you think. Because your cat isn't just eating, they're recognizing something familiar, something natural. Think about that for a second. To them, this isn't a treat. It's closer to what they were designed for. And by the way, if your cat suddenly becomes obsessed with wet food or refuses dry food altogether, don't brush it off. We'll get to what that really means later, and it's something most owners wish they understood sooner. Have you ever wondered why some cats barely drink water from their bowl? Most people assume their cat just isn't that thirsty. Here's what's actually happening. A 2016 study from the University of Edinburgh found that domestic cats have a naturally low thirst drive because they evolved to get most of their hydration from food. That means if your cat eats mostly dry food, they may be living in a constant state of mild dehydration without showing obvious signs. But when you feed wet food daily, you're restoring something their body expects. Animal nutrition research shows that increased moisture intake supports kidney function, urinary health, and overall energy levels in cats. But here's the important part. Your cat doesn't consciously understand hydration. They just feel the difference. More comfort, less internal stress, better balance. Think about that. Your daily feeding choice is directly affecting how their body feels every single day. And here's what most people don't realize. When your cat feels physically better, they become more relaxed, more social, more themselves. So feeding wet food isn't just a health decision, it's a quality of life decision. Have you ever noticed how your cat follows you, waits near you, or watches you closely around feeding time? Most people think it's just hunger. Here's what's actually happening. Cats are creatures of routine and association. When you consistently feed wet food, especially by hand or on a schedule, your cat begins to associate you with something deeply positive. Researchers who study feline behavior call this predictive bonding. You become part of a reliable pattern that brings comfort and reward. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Food carries scent. Warm, moist food releases stronger aromas, which means your presence during feeding becomes tied to those sensory experiences. In a way, your cat is linking you to safety, nourishment, and satisfaction. Think about that for a second. You're not just the person who fills the bowl, you're part of the experience. And emotionally, that changes everything. Because your cat isn't just eating, they're connecting with you. And hey, if this makes sense to you, hit like and subscribe. It helps us reach more cat lovers who actually want to understand what their cat is really saying. Have you ever thought about how feeding looks from your cat's perspective? Most people see it as a modern routine. Here's what's actually happening. In the wild, cats don't graze. They hunt, they catch, they eat. And that sequence, hunt, capture, consume, is deeply wired into them. Wet food, especially when served in portions, mimics the reward phase of that cycle. A 2019 behavioral study from the University of Bristol found that cats show higher satisfaction and reduce stress when their feeding patterns align more closely with natural hunting rhythms. And here's where it gets even more meaningful. When you provide wet food at consistent times, you're creating a predictable, successful hunt moment, even if they didn't actually hunt. Think about that.
Your cat feels like they're completing a natural cycle, and you're the one enabling it. What this reveals is deeper than routine. Your cat isn't just being fed, they're experiencing fulfillment. Have you ever noticed that your cat behaves differently around the person who feeds them? Most people assume cats treat everyone the same. Here's what's actually happening. Studies on domestic cats reveal that cats form selective bonds based on positive reinforcement and consistency, and food is one of the strongest reinforcers there is. But not all food creates the same impact. Wet food, because of its smell, texture, and biological relevance, creates a stronger emotional imprint. So when you're the one providing that, your cat doesn't just recognize you, they prioritize you. Think about that for a second. They don't do this with strangers. They don't respond this way to everyone in the house. They associate you with something essential. And over time, that shapes trust. That shapes closeness. That shapes how they see you. You're not just part of their environment, you become part of their security. Have you ever thought about what it means for your cat to depend on you for something so essential? Most people see feeding as a responsibility. Here's what's actually happening. Every time your cat eats, they're putting their survival in your hands. They trust that the food is safe. They trust that it will come consistently. They trust that you won't let them go without. And when you feed them wet food daily, you're reinforcing that trust in a deeper way. Because you're giving them something their body recognizes as real nourishment, not just filler, not just convenience. Think about that. Your cat is lowering their guard every single day in a moment of need, and they're doing it in your presence. Remember earlier when I said if your cat becomes obsessed with wet food or refuses dry food altogether? This is what I was talking about. They're not being difficult. They're choosing what feels right to their body, what feels safe, what feels natural. And emotionally, that's trust, not just in the food, but in you. Now here's something you should never ignore. What happens when your cat suddenly stops eating wet food? No excitement, no interest, just distance. Most people think it's random. Here's what's actually happening. Behavioral scientists have observed that changes in eating behavior are one of the earliest signs of stress, illness, or emotional disruption in cats. It doesn't mean your cat is being picky, it means something feels off. Think about that for a second. A behavior tied to survival doesn't change without a reason. So if your cat suddenly avoids the very food they once loved, pay attention. Check their health. Look at changes in environment, routine, or energy in your home. Because your cat isn't just rejecting food, they're responding to something deeper. And the sooner you notice, the sooner you can restore that sense of safety. Don't ignore it. So when your cat eats wet food every day, do you actually know what that means? It's not just feeding. It's not just nutrition. It's trust. It's instinct. It's your cat recognizing something real in what you provide. That's not a simple routine. That's a relationship. And that small moment when they lower their head and eat in your presence, it was never small to them. And it shouldn't be small to you either.